Here we go with take three. Hopefully this one works. Thanks for the opportunity to give you guys some information on some work we've been doing in the Pacific Northwest against Eurasian milfoil, which is one of the primary invasive species we face out here. So our company has been involved in the management of invasive aquatic plants for a number of decades. This is the footprint of our company and some of the projects we work on. Eurasian milfoil is by far the dominant invasive plant we face border to border. It's thick through the Columbia Basin system up here in the northern part of the western United States, but we also deal with it down in some of the reservoirs above Los Angeles and a number of places in the Sierra Nevadas, and it's now actually coming into Lake Tahoe. So, Eurasian milfoil, environmental impacts. This is a picture of a subsidence channel habitat in one of the major river systems in the Pacific Northwest. It's adjacent to a Corps of Engineers beach, marina, and recreational facility. You can kind of from just looking at this picture get a feel for the impacts that this plant has on human activities like swimming, boating, those types of things. But what you may not realize is it also has fairly dramatic impact on salmon. The Pacific Northwest, many of the lakes and most of the rivers are highways for salmon. It's an important part of their life cycle. They're born up in the upper parts of watersheds. The young migrate downstream to the ocean. They spend some time in the ocean. They come back to where they're born and start the process all over again. Coming downstream, though, these side channel areas that used to be critical refuge as they're moving downstream, and they're impacted with this particular plant. This Eurasian milfoil can grow to the surface in 20 to 25 feet of water. It forms these dense monocultures, it shades out other vegetation, but it can also alter water chemistry critical to the survival of things like salmon pretty dramatically. Water temperature is probably the most important. Water temperatures in these beds can be 20 degrees warmer than the main channel of the river itself. Dissolved oxygen levels are severely depressed. pH can change, and all these things, create a condition where the young guys, they can't go in there because the conditions are toxic to them. So they end up concentrated on the outside edges of these weed beds as they migrate downstream, and they're subject to intense predation there because they're focused in one area where other invasive species like northern pike, bass, and things like that can it's like a conveyor of food going by to some degree. So we've had a number of control options over the years. Some of these are kind of losing their efficacy. There is some evidence that hybrid plants are starting to show up in our neck of the woods, and many of these are kind of resistant to 2,4-D and some of the older chemistries that used to work pretty effectively on milfoil. Our company for a number of decades has had a contract with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Aquatic Plant Control Research Program based out of their national lab in Vicksburg, Mississippi. And we have a lot of this work has been done in the Pacific Northwest, and we've been kind of blessed to have the opportunity to work with them with a number of chemistries before they're registered by the EPA and before they come to market. They generally do small-scale lab studies, scale them up to mesocosms, and then when they're ready to bring the products to the field, a lot of times we've been involved in helping them with those applications and monitoring them. So we've been lucky in that we're able to see some of these technologies coming before they're available to the general public. And Procellacor is one that we've been following for a number of years because of this relationship. Just a quick example of one of the core research programs here. This is a mesocosm study that has been published a number of places. It's the Procellacor herbicide targeting Eurasian milfoil. It's a selectivity situation where they put different plants in these mesocosms and try to kind of get an idea how the herbicide is going to affect the target, being milfoil, and how it's going to impact native vegetation, which you're desirables you want to protect. Another reason this was important to us is it also had the highly tolerant Hayden Lake hybrid strain, and is one of the plants that were in the target. And just to kind of give you an idea of what we saw there, this is an untreated control. You can see the two milfoils on the left side of the slide. A number of native plants that are, this is an untreated control, like I said. This is 2 months post-treatment at a very low exposure rate for a very short contact time. You can see that the milfoils were basically completely controlled, and there was really no impact on the native species you're trying to protect and kind of release back into that space. So Procellacor was approved by the EPA in February of 2018. It is systemic, which means it translocates into the roots. It's also selective for milfoil. Milfoils are in the broadleaf family of plants, and most of the native plants are in the grass family. Lastly, it was EPA registered under the reduced risk classification, which is a new classification the Environmental Protection Agency has for herbicides that they consider to be, they're trying to get them to market to replace things that are older and that type of thing. So Procellacor has no restriction on its use in potable water reservoirs, no swimming restrictions, no fishing restrictions, and generally pretty short irrigation restrictions for drawing irrigation water from the treatment areas. One of the important things to us is that the plant concentration factor is the fastest of any of the aquatic herbicides that are on the market. If you think about putting a herbicide in water, it has to get from the water into the plant. There's a number of things in water treatments that impact efficacy, things like currents, wind-blown currents, river currents, dilution. All those things impact the ability of a herbicide to stick around the plant long enough to receive a lethal dose. Procellacor gets into the plant very, very fast, which means it's going to be extremely effective in flowing or high water exchange environments. So that's another reason we're really interested in it. So I'm going to finish up by going through a few projects and giving you some oversight on what our experiences with Procellacor have been. First time we got to put it in the field operationally was a project that we're doing with this group here. It was primarily to provide data to the Canadian government for registration, for the consideration of registration as a herbicide in Canada. This is just south of the Canadian border. It's a dissipation study as well as a efficacy study. The application was made in August, and this is just a picture of us setting up. A number of sampling points were established to look at the efficacy of the herbicide at control, and within that plot, 6 weeks post-treatment, we had excellent control of milfoil. 1 year post-treatment, they found basically no milfoil back in the plot while it thrived in the control areas. That was kind of our first taste of it. Hybrid milfoil is another problem that's been popping up in the area. So Loon Lake is north of Spokane. They've been dealing with milfoil for a long time. We had it whittled down to pretty much gone in the lake. At some point, they switched applicators, and they asked us to come back in 2016 and implement what we had proposed to them, which is primarily a triclopyr 2,4-D application. And we came out, we implemented that. We saw, pretty good burn back on the plants, but we didn't see the efficacy we would normally see. It wasn't as rapid. Plants got sick. They didn't fall down as fast. So we sort of suspected something was going on. So we sampled 10 sites, collected plants, submitted them for DNA analysis, and all of them came back as hybrid. And this is in 2016 or so. So at that point, a couple of years before Procellacor was registered, but not much was known about what to do to control milfoil. So Loon Lake has established lake management districts. They've got a funding source, and they're an agency that can accept money from, since they're an agency, they can accept grant funding. Washington State also has a freshwater aquatic plant fund. So we submitted a grant application to them to develop treatment protocols for hybrid milfoil. We proceeded to kind of do that work. So first step was to map the infestation. We collected plants from the target areas. We contracted with North Carolina State University to do contract exposure time experiments with this population of hybrid milfoils with a couple of different herbicides. The idea was to come up with application rates that we could take to the field. We took them to the field. And then we had a couple other tail end things to do in terms of developing treatment protocols for dealing with hybrids. So just a couple shots of the experimental setup. Their plants were grown out for 6 months in their greenhouse on the right high side, and they're placed in these mesocosms and treated at different rates for different exposure times. And they collected the data, and we went from there. So we looked at Procellacor and we looked at Renovate, two selective herbicides. We found excellent results in the lab in all those cases, and we actually published a paper at the Aquatic Plant Management Society meeting in San Diego a couple of years ago. So treatment was done July 9th. We got out in the field. We treated 75 acres. It's the first time we could use it in the state because our permit was just issued. We had excellent control 6 weeks post-treatment, excellent control 1 year post-treatment. American Lake is another lake near Seattle. They had a pretty dramatic Eurasian milfoil infestation as well, pretty much a monoculture around the shore of the lake. It's a fairly deep lake, drops off pretty quick. Pretty much the entire shoreline was heavily impacted, and this is the treatment area you see here. We made an application with Procellacor in August of 2019. 1 year post-treatment, we just found very few scattered plants and just excellent control. Noxon Reservoir is just upstream from Missoula, where we're supposed to be meeting. A couple of plots we did there were monitored by the Montana Department of Fish and Wildlife. We made the application. They did collected the pre and post-treatment data analysis. We did 2 plots on the river. This plot was right up by the dam. This is a run-of-the-river reservoir, so it doesn't really hold water. The water moves through pretty quick. Just excellent, pretty good, pre-treatment survey was done by the outside agencies. We made our application 6 weeks post-treatment. We saw a 93% reduction in Eurasian milfoil. We saw a little or no impact on the native species. And the 1 year post-treatment, they just found excellent control. Found no milfoil basically in the plots, and this is the data that was collected by the Fish and Game. A couple examples in Idaho. Hayden Lake is just north of Coeur d'Alene. We treated 93 acres for them in 2019. 1 year post-treatment evaluation by the Idaho Department of Agriculture. They looked at 215 survey points, basically found no Eurasian milfoil. Coquilala Lake, just north of there, is another example of a similar project, as ISDA project that we did the application, evaluated in the summer of 2020, 1 year post-treatment. Again, no milfoil found. Vancouver Lake is a shallow system just south of, or just north of Portland, Oregon, along the Columbia. It's regattas. It's a real famous place in terms of rowing regattas are held there. And they generate, it generates a considerable amount of revenue. Eurasian milfoil had gotten to the point where it was taking 100% over of 700 acres in the lake. We put a plan together, did an application, a Procellacor in 2020, and the end of 2020, and also this summer, no Eurasian milfoil was found at any one of these survey points or in the lake in general. So another extremely successful treatment. Both of these, a couple of these stories are available as videos if you want to look at them. The last thing I want to talk about is the Okanagan chain of lakes. This is looking north across into Canada from the U.S. border. Lake Osuyu straddles the U.S. border. The rivers run north of there. Here are one of the primary sources of Eurasian milfoil into the Columbia back in the 70s, and it's pretty widely distributed. We're organized to do some applications on Lake Osuyu this coming summer. There is now a registration process currently underway in Canada, and there is a research authorization in place to do plot work there. We're planning to, at a minimum, do research sites right close to the border, and kind of go from there. But we hope to move some of this work into Canada if we can find partners up there in the near future. So just in summary, this particular herbicide I think is an excellent tool for selective control of Eurasian and hybrid milfoils. You can use it in a wide range of situations because of the fast plant accumulation time. It's got a very good tox profile. And lastly, from our applicator standpoint, a 2-gallon container can replace a pallet or two of some of the algicide or the herbicides that it was competing with. So we find that it's an extremely easy thing to get into the field and work with and that type of thing. So thanks for your attention. I think 10 seconds left. That's pretty good. Anyhow, thank you for your attention.